Welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Dyba.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here.
So today we are having a conversation. We are continuing our conversation on the indirect kind of way of working, and previously you were talking about you were actually demonstrating the difference between the direct and indirect approach and how it kind of evolves in a contact, and I was benefiting from that a lot. And so today I was thinking that because like many people, that's at least how I see it, use the terms indirect and non-direct as if they were the same. And that's one thing that I would like to focus on, what if there is any difference, and what's the difference between non-direct and indirect approach. And I would say the other thing that I would like that I would like, if you want that we could talk about, is there, I would put it in a form of a question. Is it possible to be directly indirect or indirectly direct, or direct
Absolutely.
in an indirect way, and other way around?
Erickson would say, I am very direct in my indirection.
Exactly. And when you said that, one more thing actually came to my mind. Many times I see that people actually kind of use interchangeably the term indirect and the term Jesus, I forgot.
Non-direct.
No, non-direct. Permissive. And that's also not the same thing, right?
Well, some of these are semantics, Jan.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, and the reason why it's important for us to talk about why we do what we do, and by what I mean by that is the individual psychotherapist searching inside themselves for why do I do what I do, and then the ever important question, and how can I expand? How can I expand my personal consciousness? How can I become more fascinated with this person sitting in front of me, to be endlessly interesting? How I can have that, relationship, and the rest, to be reciprocal, to be able to receive and give, so that that mirrors what healthy relationships are like. How you go about it is going to be somewhat dependent on your personality and how you think. And so that individual flexibility and plasticity within the therapist right now is what's interesting me most.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is what I said, was that direct, indirect, permissive, non-direct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in how you receive it.
Okay. So
hard question. On purpose.
Hard question on purpose.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So how would you I would put the burden of responsibility on you and ask, so how would you respond to that if I would?
All of them. That every line was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to convey. So as you are, it's one thing if you're trying to practice a technique, if you're trying to practice a direct technique, or if you're trying to practice an indirect technique. I have a tendency to just add those two, direct and indirect. But non-direct, I think, is also in there. So with semantics, with words, it's what those words mean to you. And in some ways, I would encourage that that everybody, they write down the term, whatever term it is that they're interested in, write it down and write down what it means to you. Because this is what's going to be most important. We live in this world where everybody's always telling us what to do and what it means. And then you get into the world of psychotherapy, and hopefully we're doing the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not telling people what it means. We're not telling people what to do. So I became intrigued, Jan, with this idea of non-direct.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is non-direct? Because obviously that has to be different than indirect. And as I was thinking about what is non-direct, and this is just my idea, this is my stab at what it means.
Mm-hmm.
But that when sometimes with certain clients that come in, they're already in trance.
Mm-hmm.
They walk through your door, they are already in trance. They sit down and they're already in trance. And with a person like this, you say nothing. That would be non-direct. They sit in the chair. Instead of saying, how are you? What was your day? What do you work on? It's like you really say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And you simply observe. And you see what's happening with them. And that sometimes the minimal cues, which is also a fascinating topic for me, is that you're looking at the minimal cues of this person and you're seeing that something is truly going on inside them. You
Mm-hmm.
have no idea of what it is, but you're watching their face. You're watching what's happening with their eyes. You're watching if they close their eyes. And more often than not, when people are in trance, they close their eyes. And then you can see this fluttering of the eyelids. And to that, one can respond, yes, that's right. Is that interesting? Simple things.
Wouldn't that be alteration from non-direct to indirect? Because somehow you enhance a certain part of the behavior, and
it could be, but when you think about it, that more often indirect is that when you're literally saying something, off topic. It's like planting seeds, this sort of thing. So again, I haven't explored what is non-direct. So I don't have years of experience of what I think that it is, because I think more in terms of simplistic terms of direct and indirect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if we want to expand what's involved in non-direct, I think that these silences and these acknowledgments, and sometimes it's just a simple, like, you're just making a sound with the person. When you see them in pain, it's a different story. They need courage to go through the pain. And it's like, that's right. The courage to stay with that for just a little longer. So again, with the semantics, that you're following, you're not leading.
Yeah.
And so if they're leading, maybe what you're doing is non-direct. They're the direct ones. It's a little confusing, but that's the idea, is to open up new awarenesses of what you're doing.
Okay, so maybe I've got an idea.
Okay.
So I gonna tell you what I believe I understand is under those terms, and then then you could comment on that and maybe correct some of my understandings or develop them further. What do you say?
More like develop them further.
But is it a good idea?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I mean, if
briefly.
you get something really wrong, I'll say, I don't know about that, Jan. But
Yeah, exactly.
but generally, I'm like a cheering section, for new growth.
Doesn't I cannot promise that what I say will be on any growing edge, but let's try.
Let's try.
Okay, so first I'll start with the direct, then I go to non-direct, and then I try indirect, and then I'll also refer to permissive.
Okay.
How I divide those, and then we see if I am correct and if there's something that needs to be developed further. So direct statement or direct suggestion or direct anything that's direct, that to me that means that it's on the conscious linear level, which means if I were to tell you, can you open the door that are behind you, that's a direct question. If I say, for example, open or close the door, that's the direct statement. That's something. It may be direct. I'll explain that in a moment, but that's the direct statement. And so direct means that something goes on this level of communication directly towards any direction. And non-direct, how I actually understand that means that there's no direction. There's an acceptance, like as Carl Rogers said, there's an acceptance, that total acceptance of anything that happens, and just a support and building the relationship. Very important factors, but there's no direction. You don't direct a client anyway. Indirect means to me that there is a direction, but it's hidden from, it's on other level than this explicit one, that the conscious level of the content of the communication.
Yeah,
So
it's implied.
yeah,
It's implied, or yes.
for example, a statement, and you can go into a trance now or in few moments. And I don't know if you want to go into a trance sitting or standing, but I wonder how deep your unconscious would like to go today. For example, so the implication is that they will go into a trance, and the question is only when and how. And that's one way of being indirect, but there's also another way that I understand.
But I see that as quite direct.
Well, yeah.
But that's what I mean, that mm-hmm. it's they intertwine. Go
exactly. But I'm thinking, the coolest thing that I was fascinated with is that you can actually create a communication that will seem very direct, but will be indirect in its intention. For example, if I were to say to a client, for instance, and now I want you to open your eyes and see, and only see me, nothing else, and everything else will disappear. You will see only me. That seems like a direct statement, and that is a direct statement if you want someone to have a negative hallucination. But if you work with a client and they are like, for example, very resistant, and you keep in mind that you can do a lot of things with the resistance to help clients manage it. And one of the things is that you can discharge a resistance. Then I'm thinking to myself, what to do with that resistance, how to discharge it now. For example, if I choose to discharge it, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm gonna give to the client, to that particular client, a suggestion that he will not be able to, carry out or carry on. And in this way, they will be able to win the battle that they are actually trying to take on with me. So I'm telling them this suggestion because I hope that they will not be able to develop the hypnotic phenomenon. Plus, I'm putting them in a I think double bind situation, because if they will if they will not be able to create the hallucination, then the resistance is discharged, at least to a point. And if they will create the negative hallucination, then we are over the resistance. So either way, that's a win-win situation. And so I'm telling that direct statement, but my intention of discharging the resistance is indirect. And in this way, the intention that I have is hidden. And so, the observer, outside observer, would say, look how direct he is in what he's doing right now in this trance. But if they would know the intention of it, they would say, okay, that's more indirect kind of statement, because the intention is
so, but it's also stimulating different levels of consciousness simultaneously. Now, that's really what trance is about, is to go into different levels of consciousness, where the linear level is only one of them. And so with this example that you give of you will see me, only me, everything else will be blurry. That has embedded within it a lot of levels of consciousness, and also seeding, planting various seeds. Yeah. And even though you're saying you will, which is very direct, instead of how, a question, how will you do this type of thing, or can you do this?
Yeah, I wonder when you're gonna do it.
Or I wonder when you're going to do this. That I think when it comes to asking a question, and you're correct, that the intention behind it is going to give rise to the tone that you use when you say it. Now we're getting into the subtle stuff. When you get into tone and you get into the rate of speech. And this is why when you read about like a transcript, for instance, it doesn't include tone. It doesn't include rate of speech. And this is why we need direct experience, so that we really know what to do. And so when we began, and I said, every therapist needs to work it out for themselves how this is. You're giving the prime example of it. In Erickson's office, there was an elephant. There was a poster of an elephant, and it had it was like a psychedelic elephant, as I recall. It was very interesting. And now it's not there now when you go and visit Erickson's home, but this poster used to be there. And he would sometimes draw people's attention to how you might look at an elephant and where you might look at an elephant. And some people see only the tail if they're behind the elephant. Some people see only the eyes if they're right there, an eye level with them. And so when we talk about direct, indirect, non-direct, permissive, this sort of thing, to me, it's how you're looking at that elephant. And even if you get way, way, way above the elephant and you look down on the elephant, well, you're not seeing its toes. It's hard to see the whole elephant at the same time, if not impossible.
was that actually, by the way, highly indirect metaphorical language that you were using to explain that?
Absolutely. But also in your mind, you were seeing an elephant and you were,
exactly.
yeah,
Plus,
it was like the negative.
It also launched some associations connected with when I was a student. I had a poster in my room that had some kind of psychedelic shapes that when you looked at them they would seem like moving, and I was thinking about that, and I pictured an elephant in those colored with those patterns.
Mm-hmm. And those happy memories?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and that's like another element of that one doesn't have to always evoke happy memories. For some people, it could be a traumatic memory, but I could tell from the way that your eyes were moving that it was a happy memory.
Exactly.
And for someone who's you're not, but for someone who comes in and they're really involved in sadness, and that's maybe even gone into depression, if you can shock them a little bit with an indirect kind of happy memory, it's an interesting thing to do. I'm playing on your concept of discharging resistance. And so if I take it to, I don't know, an odd level, it's like, how could you help discharge somebody from a depression? I don't know if it's possible, but I'd sure think that it's worth experimenting with when it's like, true and authentic. And that obviously would have to be indirect. I mean, you can't say you're not going to be depressed anymore.
Is there anyone who actually got better after something like that?
Well, I haven't tried it. Now I'm thinking, hey, why not? But chances are you would get someone that was saying, watch me, doctor, I can get worse.
Exactly. I mean, I hear that constantly, that you're not supposed to do it, and then I ask, have you ever tried? And they go no, and I go, maybe there's supposed to be someone who will try all those solutions that you're not supposed to do, and then suddenly it will be like, so it's so simple. It's just, you just need to say stop it, and then that's it.
Well, stop it can be done in very indirect forms. And so for someone who's really stuck, my compassion is massive for someone that's really stuck in this cycle of whatever, the cycle of anxiety, the cycle of depression, these like really good people that kind of get stuck there. That's where psychological shocks and surprises can sometimes jar a person enough where the spiral gets distended or smaller, that sort of thing. And that as it rights itself, it may then be in a new form. And that's the purpose of when we go in with whatever intention it is, or whatever, if it's direct or indirect or permissive or non-direct. I guess we've got, the party of four.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about the people suffering from depression, and I'm thinking about the fact that most of the people that I knew that were suffering from depression, these were really actually very like sensitive people, and like they and it's a gift. I mean, it's when you are depressed, you don't see it that way most of the times, but the whole thing of being sensitive and, able to tune in to others. Empathy goes with it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very like, just I was thinking about these things. So going back to the last one, permissive. When I think about permissive, I think about language, permissive language, as opposed to what's the opposition of permissive? It would be
I think
forceful, right?
yes, forceful would be an excellent
So
opposite.
yeah, as opposed to go and close the window, the permissive would be, I wonder, for example, you can close the window now or in the future, or just leave it open and we're gonna freeze, but you don't want to freeze, so
or would you like to freeze?
exactly.
Like, with this brightness, would you like to freeze? Sometimes wouldn't it be nice to be able to just freeze out some sort of sadness that you have? So I could see that it could be utilized in a lot of different ways. And depending on what you say, particularly if you watch their mouth, of what's happening with their mouth, and if you say something that they think is odd or funny, the corners turn up in a slight smile, or they go from a frown to not a frown.
Yeah.
And then your I like to call it the yo-yoing of consciousness. But Roxana Erickson, Milton's daughter, she corrects me when I say that, and she says, no, that's fractionation. But I like, which is a beautiful word. I love fractals, so like the kaleidoscopes of all the things that could happen and change. I think that that's fantastic. I love that image. But as you're with this, what you're describing of as permissive, you're giving a whole bunch of opportunities. It's like that, thinking about all the considerations and putting them out there, and then they get to choose or not choose. And I hadn't thought of that as being permissive, but I believe that you're correct in that it's and when it's done correctly, it's actually a lot of fun for the therapist, and it's also it is jarring in a positive way for the client.
So permissive in that sense means that it leaves a choice.
I think so. I think so, that there's just this world of opportunities, that there's a saying, anything that Brer Rabbit can do in a cabbage patch, he can go up, he can go over, he can go around, he can go through, he can go backwards. I mean, that when you cover all of the bases of opportunity that you can think of at the time, that it expands the consciousnesses, plural, of that particular client. And when people come in to see us, more often than not, they're stuck someplace. That's the stage 2 of being stuck someplace. And so they welcome it. They welcome this smorgasbord of opportunities of what they can do. And when it's done within trance of, I would call it like permissive indirect.
They can be combined, right?
Yes, as we get into hybrids and things like that, because that's the way that we are as humans. That we're when you laugh at a joke, for instance, there's a lot, generally complexity within the joke that will make you laugh. You know, unless it's like, I don't know if you have this in Poland, but in the US, we have something called dad jokes. And dad jokes are sort of like straightforward and like silly, you know, like a groan. But the kinds of things that you really laugh out loud with, there's some kind of contradiction associated with it. And it makes your mind go to lots of different places. And so then, you know, like you laugh in disbelief and trying to figure it out. And also there's usually something that's really true within a joke that's really funny. And so I guess, you know, I'm introducing something that I've never thought about before, but, you know, it's almost like introducing a joke within the psychotherapy. Now, one would have to be exceedingly careful as a therapist to actually introduce a joke, you know, because it can go so wrong.
True.
But that the person who taught me to be fearless within the context of being a therapist was Ernest, you know, my husband. And sometimes he would, you know, tell a joke and laugh at his own joke, which, you know, when you think about yourself in regular consciousness with, you know, going out with somebody, you don't tell a joke and then laugh at your own joke. But he would do that a lot. Did you ever experience that with him?
Yeah.
You know, and so in the category of things that probably shouldn't be done, right? And yet, with the good-naturedness of him, and when he would say something like that, and he was saying it to himself, and taking the rest of us along for the ride, came from a very deep philosophy that he had. And this is not something that we've talked about. He really believed that if you're asking somebody to go into trance, you need to go into trance with them.
Yeah.
And he would go into trance every time he was working with a client.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, I'm trying to do the same kind of thing because that kind of, you have a totally different rapport with a person when you are in that state. I mean, you know, being with someone down there, obviously in a different way, because as a therapist, you need to, you know, at least what I do, I always am like, you know, I pay attention and stuff. The client can just go into it and, you know, stay safe and be safe in that state because I'm taking care of him or her, to that matter. And, you know, and so I'm there with them. But one foot, it's always in the office. In my case.
Well, there's your inner observer, that you're the therapist. And so there's this part of you that understands and can observe yourself and can observe also the client. And that when you're with the client and you are also in trance, you are not working on your own issues.
Yeah.
You know, this is the difference. So you're not working through your own issues. You are literally joining in with them. It's almost like a mirror neuron thing. And so they're feeling really supported. And so you're not just this person in this full linear consciousness observing what they're doing. That, you know, in that type of joining in, these are subtle things. And it requires having a good observer within the therapist, because sometimes when a client has an issue, that the therapist actually might have that issue themselves they haven't completely worked out. So this is excellent information for the therapist. It's like, oh, I'm not completely clear with this yet. So I'm going to make sure that later I'm going to, focus in on this in whatever way one does that, whether they see their own therapist, whether they write about it, whether they dream about it, whether they do self-hypnosis, that sort of thing. But it's really good information. Oh, I get to clear this up now too. I didn't realize that I have it. And so the giving nature of going into trance with the client, it literally is that. And the benefit is, do you find this, Jan, when you come out of it, you're rested?
Focused and energized, I would.
Okay, so you're energized. You're not tired.
Yeah, but in my case, the best benefit, I think, is that I am during the whole process, I am more focused on the important thing that the client, is going through or working
so
on.
You're that person that you're just seeing the client and everything else around them is fuzzy.
Exactly.
Blurry.
Totally focused on someone.
Yes, and so when you think about that when you use that technique, you're also telling it to yourself. So it's really interesting. Well, I think have we covered from your perspective these four?
I think so. I can only say one more thing. If someone thinks or has an impression that there are some questions left, you may just leave it under the video in case you are watching it on YouTube, or send it to us through one of our websites when you are watching this through one of the podcast providers services. Yeah. And if you will send us the questions, even by leaving a comment or sending it to one of our emails, right, or to one of our Facebook pages, we can develop that question further and the issue and create more content on whatever will be of interest to you. Am I right?
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing is that if we've stimulated thinking upon those that are listening of new ways and new possibilities, then we've done our job well today. And I think we have done our job well today. I know my mind is going in many directions right now of how I could be a better and more sensitive therapist.
Same here. My mind always goes into multiple directions after talking to you. So, it's always enjoy and it's always very stimulating to me.
Great. Okay.
So everyone, have a great day, great weekend, great whatever day that is that you're watching it. And till next time. This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.